While my family treated my grandmother like a bank account, I gave her my time, my care, and my love. They laughed at me for being poor. Then the lawyer opened her will, and their laughter died instantly. This is one of those revenge stories rooted in family betrayal, where kindness wins and greed pays the price. My siblings spent years laughing at my small apartment while counting down the days until Grandma passed away so they could cash in. But when the lawyer opened her will, the laughter stopped instantly, and their greedy faces turned pale as ghosts. Hi, my name is Anna Taylor, and if you saw me walking down the street a year ago, you probably wouldn't have looked twice. I drove a 15-year-old sedan with a dent in the rear bumper. I lived in a studio apartment that barely fit a full-size bed, and I wore clothes that I had thrifted or mended myself. According to my family, I was the failure, the black sheep, the disappointment. But they didn't know that while they were chasing status and appearances, I was chasing something much more valuable: connection, integrity, and love. They thought poverty was a lack of money. I learned the hard way that true poverty is a lack of character. And looking back, I realized that my grandmother, the matriarch of our family, was watching all of us much more closely than anyone realized. To understand why the reading of the will was such a nuclear event in my family, you have to understand the dynamic I grew up in. My parents, Richard and Susan, were obsessed with image. They weren't actually wealthy, but they were experts at pretending to be. They lived in a house they couldn't afford, drove leased luxury cars, and were constantly drowning in credit card debt to keep up with their country club friends. They had 3 children. My older brother, Kyle, was the golden boy. He worked in finance, or at least that's what he told people. In reality, he was a mid-level manager who spent more time gambling on high-risk stocks than actually working. Then there was my younger sister, Jessica. She was striving to be a lifestyle influencer. She was beautiful, vapid, and cruel, measuring her self-worth in likes and engagement metrics. And then there was me, the middle child, Anna the artist, Anna the dreamer, Anna the mistake. I never cared about the country club or the brand name purses. I wanted to open a community art studio. I wanted to teach underprivileged kids how to paint and sculpt. I wanted to create things with my hands. My parents were horrified. When I announced I was dropping out of the business degree they forced me into so I could pursue fine arts, they cut me off completely. I was 19. For the next decade, I worked 3 jobs. I waited tables, I walked dogs, and I worked at a library, all while saving every penny to buy art supplies. I missed family vacations because I couldn't afford the plane tickets. I missed fancy dinners because I couldn't afford the split of the bill. And every time I did show up, I was the punchline. I remember one Christmas specifically. It was about 3 years ago. I had scraped together enough money to buy everyone thoughtful, handmade gifts. I had made my mother a beautiful ceramic vase glazed in her favorite shade of blue. When she opened it, she held it by the rim with 2 fingers like it was a dirty diaper. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's rustic. Did you make this in that little class of yours?" Kyle laughed, swirling his expensive scotch. "Maybe you can sell it at a flea market, Anna. Might help you pay rent this month so you don't have to ask Dad for a loan again." I had never asked Dad for a loan, not once. But that was the narrative they liked. Anna the leech, Anna the charity case. Jessica chimed in, filming the whole thing for her social media story. "Guys, look at this. #humble gifts. At least she tried, right?" They didn't see the hours of work. They didn't see the love. They only saw that it didn't have a designer logo. The only person who didn't laugh was Grandma Rose. Grandma Rose was my father's mother. She was 88 years old, sharp as a tack, but her body was failing her. She sat in her wheelchair in the corner of the room, observing everything with piercing blue eyes. She was incredibly wealthy, having inherited a massive estate and investment portfolio from my grandfather, who had been a brilliant inventor. Everyone in the family treated Grandma Rose like a walking ATM. Kyle was always pitching her investment opportunities. Jessica was always asking for advances on her inheritance to fund her travels. My parents were constantly trying to get her to sign over the deed to her estate, ostensibly to save on taxes, but really because they wanted to sell it and downsize her into a facility. That Christmas, Grandma Rose wheeled herself over to me. She took the vase from my mother's dismissive hands and held it close. "It is beautiful, Anna," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "It has a soul, something this house is severely lacking." My father scoffed. "Mom, don't encourage her. She needs to get a real job." Grandma just looked at him, a look of pure disappointment. Then she looked at me and squeezed my hand. 2 months later, Grandma's health took a sharp turn for the worse. She had a stroke that left her partially paralyzed on her left side. She needed full-time care. The family convened a meeting at my parents' house. They didn't invite me, but I showed up anyway because I heard about it from Grandma's nurse. I walked into the living room to hear them discussing numbers. "Look," Kyle was saying, running calculations on his tablet. "If we hire 24-hour private nursing, it's going to drain the liquid assets within 3 years. That's our money burning up." "We have to be practical," my mother agreed, sipping her wine. "There's that facility out on the highway, the state-run one. It's not glamorous, but it's affordable." "You want to put Grandma in a state home?" I interrupted, standing in the doorway. "A woman worth millions, and you want to dump her in a warehouse?" They all turned to look at me with identical expressions of annoyance. "Anna, you don't understand finance," my father said dismissively. "We are trying to protect the estate." "You mean you're trying to protect your inheritance," I shot back. "She's your mother. She deserves to be in her own home, surrounded by her own things." "Well, unless you're volunteering to wipe her calm down and feed her," Jessica sneered. "We don't have a choice. None of us have the time. We have careers. We have lives." I looked at them. I looked at their cold, calculating faces. And I made a decision that would change everything. "I'll do it," I said. They laughed. "You? You live in a shoebox. You work 3 jobs. How are you going to care for her?" "I'll quit my jobs," I said. "I'll move into the estate. I'll take care of her full time. All I ask is that the estate covers my food and basic bills. I don't want a salary." My father's eyes lit up. He saw a solution that cost him nothing. "You'd do that? Free labor? For Grandma?" "Yes." They agreed instantly. To them, I was the perfect sucker. I was saving them $10,000 a month in nursing fees, preserving the pot of gold they were waiting to inherit. They even made me sign a document stating that my room and board was not a form of pre-inheritance and that I had no claim to the property. I signed it without reading it. I didn't care. For the next 18 months, my life was Grandma Rose. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I learned how to lift her, how to bathe her, how to manage her medications. There were nights I didn't sleep because she was confused and scared. There were days where the physical exhaustion made me want to collapse. But there was also beauty. We spent hours talking. Since she couldn't move much, we sat in her sunroom and she told me stories about her life. She told me about how she and Grandpa started with nothing, how they built their empire on hard work and integrity. She told me about the disappointment she felt watching her son, my father, grow into a shallow, materialistic man. She asked me about my art. I set up a small easel in her room, and I would paint while she watched. She critiqued my work, not with malice, but with genuine insight. "You have a gift, Anna," she told me one afternoon. "You capture the feeling of things, not just the look." During those 18 months, my family rarely visited. My parents would stop by once a month for maybe 20 minutes. They wouldn't ask Grandma how she was feeling. They would walk around the house with a contractor, discussing which walls they were going to knock down once she was dead. I remember my mother standing in the living room, pointing at the antique velvet curtains. "Those have to go," she said loudly, right in front of Grandma. "We need something modern, gray linen. And this carpet, it smells like old people. We'll rip it all out." Grandma just sat there, staring out the window, gripping my hand so hard her knuckles turned white. Kyle only came when he needed a signature on some legal document, trying to get power of attorney. Grandma would feign sleep every time he arrived until he left in a huff. Jessica visited exactly twice. Both times she brought a ring light and a tripod. She took selfies with Grandma, captioning them, "So blessed to spend time with my Nana. Love her so much. #family first." As soon as she got the photo, she left, checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. They treated her like she was already a corpse. They treated me like the help. One evening, about a week before she passed, Grandma called me to her bedside. She was very weak. "Anna," she whispered, "open the bottom drawer of the nightstand. There is a leather notebook." I found it. It was old and worn. "Write this down," she said. "I want you to call Mr. Henderson in the morning. He is my personal lawyer, not the family lawyer your father uses. My lawyer." I did as she asked. Mr. Henderson came the next day. I left them alone in the room for 2 hours. When he came out, he looked at me with a strange expression, a mix of sadness and respect. He patted my shoulder and left without saying a word. Grandma passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 days later. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. I was the only one there. When I called my parents to tell them the news, my father didn't ask if she had been in pain. He didn't ask if I was okay. His first words were, "Okay, don't touch anything. We'll be there in an hour with the appraiser." I hung up on him. The funeral was a grotesque display of performance art. My family, who couldn't spare an hour to sit with her while she was alive, suddenly became the chief mourners. My mother wailed theatrically at the graveside. Kyle gave a eulogy about how Grandma was his inspiration, despite not knowing her favorite color or her middle name. Jessica live-streamed the procession. I sat in the back row, wearing a simple black dress, numb. I didn't cry. I had done my grieving with her, in the quiet moments of the night. At the reception, the vultures were circling. I overheard my father talking to his golf buddy. "Yes, the market is hot. We're going to list the estate immediately. It should clear $3 million easily, plus the portfolio. Finally, we can breathe a little." Kyle was already browsing sports cards on his phone. "I'm thinking Porsche," he told his wife. "I've earned it." They ignored me completely, except when my mother told me to help the caterers clean up because we aren't paying you to sit around. 2 days later, we were summoned to Mr. Henderson's office for the reading of the will. The atmosphere in the conference room was celebratory. My parents, Kyle, and Jessica were chatting excitedly. They had literally brought champagne. They popped the cork before Mr. Henderson even sat down. I sat in the corner, feeling small and exhausted. I was preparing to go back to my old life. I had already started looking for a new studio apartment and had applied to get my library job back. I expected nothing. Maybe a keepsake or a small amount of cash, if I was lucky. Mr. Henderson walked in. He was a stern man with thick glasses. He sat down, opened a thick file, and looked over the rim of his spectacles at the champagne bottle on the table. "I would advise you to put that away," he said coldly. "This is a legal proceeding, not a frat party." My father chuckled. "Lighten up, Henderson. It's what Mother would have wanted, a celebration of life." Mr. Henderson didn't smile. He cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Rosemarie Taylor, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." He went through the standard legal jargon. Then he got to the distribution of assets. "To my son Richard and his wife Susan," my parents leaned forward, grinning, "I leave the sum of $1. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. "I'm sorry?" my father said, his smile freezing. "Did you say 1 million?" $1, Mr. Henderson repeated. My mother let out a strangled gasp. "That's a mistake. That has to be a typo." Mr. Henderson continued, ignoring her. "To my grandson, Kyle, I leave the sum of $1 and my collection of vintage cookbooks so that he may learn that success requires preparation and patience, not just an appetite." Kyle slammed his hand on the table. "This is a joke, right?" "To my granddaughter, Jessica, I leave the sum of $1 and my antique vanity mirror so that she may continue to look at the only person she has ever truly cared about." Jessica's mouth fell open. She looked like she had been slapped. "And finally," Mr. Henderson said, his voice softening slightly, "to my granddaughter, Anna." Every head in the room snapped toward me. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. To Anna, who held my hand when everyone else was reaching for my wallet. To Anna, who gave me her time when she had none to spare. To Anna, who showed me that the Taylor spirit of integrity and love is not dead, but merely dormant in a different branch, I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes the family home, the vacation property in the Hamptons, my investment portfolio, all personal effects, and the entirety of my liquid cash assets. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely deafening. Then the explosion happened. My father stood up so fast his chair tipped over. "You manipulated her!" He screamed at me, his face turning purple. "You little snake! You poisoned her mind against us while you were playing nurse!" My mother was hyperventilating. "This is fraud! This is undue influence! She was senile! We'll sue! We'll contest this!" Mr. Henderson slammed a hand on the desk. "Sit down, Richard." He pulled out a flash drive and plugged it into his laptop. He turned the screen toward us. "Mrs. Taylor anticipated this reaction," Mr. Henderson said. "She recorded a video statement the day she signed the will to certify her soundness of mind." He pressed play. There was Grandma, sitting in her wheelchair in the sunroom. She looked frail, but her eyes were sharp. "Richard, Susan, Kyle, Jessica," she began. Her voice was recorded clearly. "If you are watching this, you are angry. You are likely accusing Anna of manipulating me. Let me be clear. Anna never asked for a penny. In fact, she is the only one of you who never spoke of money." She looked directly into the camera lens. "I sat in that house for 18 months. I listened to you, Richard, talking about tearing down the walls my husband built. I listened to you, Kyle, scheming to sell my jewelry. I saw you, Jessica, using me as a prop. You waited for me to die. You treated me as an obstacle to your wealth. Anna treated me as a human being. Money is a tool," she continued. "In your hands, it is a weapon of vanity. In Anna's hands, it will be a tool for creation. I am not punishing you. I am simply refusing to fund the lifestyles that have made you hollow people. Learn to build your own lives. It is the greatest gift I can give you." The video ended. My mother was sobbing, not tears of grief, but tears of financial terror. "But the debts, the mortgage, we counted on this." Mr. Henderson closed the folder. "The estate is valued at approximately $18 million. All taxes have been prearranged. The keys to the house are here for Miss Taylor. As for the rest of you, you have 30 days to remove any personal property you may have stored at the main estate, after which the locks will be changed." I walked out of that office in a daze. My family followed me to the parking lot, screaming. "Anna, please," my mother begged, grabbing my arm. Her aggression had instantly shifted to desperation. "You can't do this. We're family. We'll lose the house. Your father's business is underwater. We need help." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had mocked my pottery, who had called me a failure, who had treated her own mother like a burden. I pulled my arm away. "Grandma was right," I said quietly. "You need to learn to build your own lives." "You selfish witch!" Kyle screamed. "I'll sue you into the ground." "Go ahead," I said, unlocking the door to my dented sedan. "But remember, I have Mr. Henderson, and I have $18 million to fight you. You have $1. Spend it wisely." The next year was a whirlwind. They tried to sue, of course. They found a shady lawyer who worked on contingency, but Mr. Henderson crushed them in court before it even went to trial. The video evidence was irrefutable. Without the inheritance they had leveraged their entire lives against, their house of cards collapsed. My parents had to sell their home to cover their debts. They moved into a 2-bedroom condo. My father had to go back to working a regular 9-to-5 job at 60 years old. Kyle's wife left him when the money didn't come through. He had to sell his sports car and declare bankruptcy. Jessica had to get a real job. The last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at a dental office. The influencer dream died when she couldn't afford the trips and the clothes. And me? I didn't buy a Porsche. I didn't move into a penthouse. I renovated Grandma's house, but not the way my parents wanted. I restored it. I kept the velvet curtains. I kept the soul of the place. And then I fulfilled my promise to myself. I bought an old warehouse in the city district and converted it. It's called the Rose Center for the Arts. It's a fully funded community art space. We offer free classes to low-income children. We provide studio space for struggling artists. We have a gallery where we sell their work, commission-free. I spend my days there, covered in clay, teaching kids that what they make with their hands has value. 6 months ago, I was walking out of the center and I saw my mother standing across the street. She looked older, tired. She was watching me. I stopped. We locked eyes. For a moment, I thought she might cross the street. I thought she might apologize. I thought she might finally want to know me, not for what I had, but for who I was. But she didn't. She just shook her head, pulled her coat tighter, and walked away. It hurt, but not like it used to, because I realized that I didn't lose a family. I just finally saw them clearly. I got into my car, I finally upgraded to a reliable hybrid, and drove home to the estate. I walked into the sunroom, sat in Grandma's chair, and looked out at the garden. I picked up a lump of clay I had brought home with me and started to mold it. They mocked my poverty because they thought money was the only way to be rich. But as I sat there in the home that love built, I knew the truth. They are the poor ones, and I have never been wealthier. Family betrayal cuts the deepest, but sometimes it leads to the most powerful justice. If you want more family drama, inheritance karma, and stories where the underestimated win, hit subscribe.